March is ahead of us, the month that represents an absolute moment of truth for our bee colonies. Many people believe winter is the hardest test and that colonies are safe as soon as the snow melts. But the reality in the field is completely different. Your colonies do not die from winter, from deep snow, or from low temperatures. They collapse right now from severe exhaustion and a critical lack of protein. This is a strong message to all of you who are currently out in the field, because the steps we take in the coming weeks directly determine the fate of the entire season and the health of our apiaries. To understand why March is such a harsh month and why so many colonies fail right on the threshold of spring, we have to explain the importance of pollen in simple, practical beekeeping language. Pollen, flower pollen, is not just some minor dietary supplement. It is the only true source of protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals for our bees. A bee without carbohydrates, without honey, dies of starvation. But without pollen, the entire colony loses its ability to create new life and to renew itself. During this transitional period, the queen senses the shift in weather and begins laying eggs much more intensively. For those young larvae to develop into healthy worker bees, nurse bees must produce massive amounts of royal jelly, and synthesizing that jelly requires a large amount of protein. However, there is another issue that is rarely discussed, yet it is decisive in March. The winter bees that carried the colony through the cold months are already at the limit of their biological endurance. Their fat bodies, which served as a reservoir of energy and protein throughout the winter, are now being rapidly depleted because they must take on the role of nurses for the new brood. At the same time, they are the heaters of the hive and the producers of royal jelly. That means March is not just a question of, is there pollen or not? It is a question of who is carrying the burden of development. If there is not enough external protein coming in, that burden falls directly on the bodies of the winter bees. They begin burning their own reserves in order to produce royal jelly. And every bee that burns out too early means fewer workers available in April. That is exactly why many colonies look strong at the beginning of March, but suddenly collapse by the middle of the month. Not because they did not have honey, not because it was cold, but because the old bees were depleted faster than the young ones could replace them. March is the period when generations overlap and transition. If there is a break in that transition, if there is no sufficient bridge between winter bees and spring bees, a biological vacuum forms. That is when we see what beekeepers often describe as, the colony had everything, and yet it just stopped. That stopped is not a mystery. It is a protein collapse. Internal consumption inside the hive rises sharply and uncontrollably in March. Bees are forced to fly out in cold and windy conditions in a desperate search for any source of pollen. Consider this simple fact. If an average colony at this moment requires at least 500 grams of pollen for proper spring development, but due to bad weather, rain, and cold can bring in only 300 grams, an immediate and severe deficit forms inside the hive. That shortage has to be compensated somehow, and bees compensate by drawing on reserves from their own bodies, from their fat tissue, dramatically and rapidly exhausting themselves. To truly understand how large that consumption is, we need to look at the bigger picture. In natural bee nutrition, proteins come from pollen, and its importance is best illustrated by the following ratios. To raise 10,000 larvae, approximately 1 kilogram of bees, about 1 kilogram of honey is required, but around 2 kilograms of pollen are needed. That means 8.5 times more pollen is required. Over the course of a full year, a colony needs an average of 18 kilograms of pollen. Around 25% of the bees are activated as foragers. About 17% of bees transitioning between life stages collect both pollen and nectar, and the remaining roughly 60% older bees collect only nectar. In order for a bee to activate its hypopharyngeal glands at all, it must consume pollen equal to about 10% of its own body weight, and not just any pollen, but pollen containing at least 20% protein. There is another important phenomenon we must highlight, and it relates to how we practice beekeeping today. In modern beekeeping, professional production often leaves colonies at an absolute minimum of reserves. Why does this happen? Professional beekeepers, especially those running migratory operations, are forced to extract as much yield as possible from every nectar flow, particularly when dealing with varietal honeys that lose their classification if mixed. Late fall flows are often harvested to the very end, or large numbers of splits are made from strong colonies to expand production. Because of these operational demands, colonies enter winter and reach early spring with reserves reduced to the bare minimum for survival. Although this approach may bring short-term profit, it creates enormous risk in March, when biological consumption multiplies and every empty space in the comb can mean the death of a colony. Colonies that live at minimum reserve levels throughout the season should not surprise us with autumn exhaustion and weak spring development the following year. Year-round depletion stresses bees, unquestionably leading to a loss of immunity, and such apiaries often face unexplained losses. We must look at a very clear example that shows the difference in larval feeding depending on the level of reserves inside the hive. Research has shown that bees in colonies with only 4.5 kilograms of reserves fed each larva with 2.1 grams of royal jelly, while colonies with 12.6 kilograms of reserves fed each larva with 4.8 grams of royal jelly, resulting in significantly larger larval mass where reserves were protein-rich. When there is abundant, high-quality pollen in nature, when weather conditions allow foraging, and when the hive is well supplied, nurse bees literally bathe the larva in royal jelly. Those young larvae are swimming in food, receiving every nutrient necessary for optimal biological development. In addition, higher protein reserves ensure greater nectar intake, because bees are an extremely economical species. With stronger reserves in the hive, the loss of foragers is not catastrophic, since they can be replaced by a larger, well-fed brood. But what happens when a colony suffers from a lack of protein? Bees shift into a strict survival mode and begin aggressively conserving resources. Larvae no longer swim in royal jelly. They receive only the bare minimum required to survive and be capped in the cell. The consequences of this depletion and forced rationing do not disappear with warmer weather. They follow the colony throughout the entire season. A bee that emerges from an undernourished larva is physically smaller, has poorly developed fat bodies, and a permanently weakened immune system. Such a worker will live significantly shorter than her healthy sisters, will not be able to properly nurse the next generation, and her ability to gather nectar during the main flow will be drastically reduced. In the long term, a protein deficiency in March directly translates into a dramatic loss of honey yield in May and June. However, before we even consider any kind of stimulative feeding or protein supplementation, we must emphasize one of the most important rules in beekeeping. Varroa control is the priority above all other priorities. Varroa is our #1 enemy. First and foremost, treat your bees for Varroa. Pay careful attention to eliminating this destructive parasite. If your colony has a high level of Varroa infestation, any attempt to stimulate early spring brood rearing is in fact stimulation for rapid parasite reproduction. In that case, you are not feeding and developing bees, you are directly feeding and multiplying Varroa. Before any intervention aimed at encouraging spring development, before any patty is placed, you must be absolutely certain that Varroa levels in your apiary are under strict control. Only after we have secured colony health and cleared dangerous parasites do we come to the concrete solution for our spring challenge. The solution is high-quality protein patties, used as essential supplementation when there is not enough quality pollen in nature or when cold weather prevents bees from collecting it. Patties are typically given during periods of nectar shortage, in late winter or early spring, when bees need energy support or stimulation for early brood development. As long as there is insufficient pollen in nature, quality protein that bees cannot gather due to cold weather, or when flying would cause unnecessary energy loss and risk freezing protein reserves, and supplements ensure better brood feeding and freer flight activity. By placing protein patties directly on the top bars above the cluster, we bridge this critical nutritional gap. Bees receive the basic building material needed for royal jelly production, ensuring proper larval development while preventing the deadly exhaustion of winter bees that must carry this burden. To make this crucial process easier and help you prepare the highest quality feed for your colonies, we have prepared something special for you. A complete checklist with detailed and verified protein patty recipes is available in the description below this video, as our free gift to all of you who follow the channel. We will not spend time here listing every single ingredient, because all precise measurements, gram amounts, and preparation instructions can be easily downloaded by clicking the link below and immediately applied in your own apiary. Fellow beekeepers, March is a month that does not forgive mistakes, but it rewards knowledge and timely action. Our responsibility to these remarkable creatures and to our own production demands that we be fully alert, precise, and accountable at this moment. Do not allow your colonies to starve and collapse while you stand by waiting for full spring bloom and the nectar flow to begin. Act wisely, use knowledge, and protect your apiary when it needs you most. If today's report was valuable to you, if it helped you better understand the challenges we are currently facing in the field, I invite you to like this video. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next important episodes, and be sure to follow this entire series. All of the topics we cover are logically and deeply connected, building for you a complete, secure, and successful beekeeping system. I wish you calm bees, strong and healthy colonies, and an exceptionally successful start to this season. Happy beekeeping, and I will see you in the next episode.